Yaqub and Isha were born by Rivka, when the Prophet Ishaq was 60 years old in Palestine. The two twins were born with Isha's body as the first to come out, followed by Yaqub's body in a state of hand holding his brother's heel. Ishaq really loves Isha because Ishaq thinks that Isha as the eldest son will receive an inheritance gift from his father. Meanwhile, Yaqub is the favorite grandson of the Prophet Ibrahim because Yaqub likes to stay at home to be near and learn from him. Yaqub is also his mother's favorite child. Rivka, because the youngest son likes to help and diligently takes care of the house to make his parents' work easier. These two grandchildren of Prophet Ibrahim initially had something in common with each other. Both of them learned knowledge from their grandfather in their old age. Isha admires his grandfather because of his abundant wealth and respectable worldly position, which is respected by many people, while Yaqub praises Allah who bestowed many gifts on his grandfather, so he prays that Allah will do the same for him. As time passed, Yaqub became more and more diligent in worshipping Allah, according to what was taught by Ibrahim. On the other hand, Isha thinks that in order to follow his grandfather's success, he must leave the house and then set off to wander alone, but remain devoted to his parents as Ibrahim's journey to Palestine. However, Isha has a different goal. Ibrahim left his ancestral land to carry out God's command, while Isha intends to get a lot of wealth and worldly luxuries. As proof of his filial piety towards his parents, especially his father, Isha hunted many animals to give to Ishaq, who likes to eat meat. Isha's attitude adds to Ishaq's sense of confidence that he will hand over the gift of inheritance to Isha. As his grandfather's death approached, Isha was astonished and could not believe that someone as great as Ibrahim had to face death that would end all achievements in the world. Isha decided to go far away to forget this pain. Isha suspects that someone is using magic to harm his grandfather, so he is determined to kill someone who is known to have wanted to kill Ibrahim, namely Namrud's. Isha went armed with a sword while looking for the place where Namrud's was. When he found Namrud's hunting in the meadow, Isha immediately stabbed Namrud's body from behind, then Namrud's returned a hard blow to Isha's body. He was surprised to see Isha, who reminded him of Ibrahim. Isha cursed Namrud's while claiming to be a descendant of Abraham who took revenge for what had been done to his grandfather. Despite being hit hard on his body, Isha managed to kill Namrud's. Then Isha fled against Namrud's army, who came and chased him. While Isha decides to leave, Yaqub stays at home and he is questioned by Ibrahim about the reason for his presence. Yaqub replied that he believed that Allah was always with his grandfather, so Yaqub wanted to be close to him. Hearing these words, Ibrahim blessed his grandson while declaring that he would inherit the blessings of Ishaq. These blessings were rare blessings from Allah for Abraham, which were then passed on to Ishaq. Yaqub was surprised to hear this, because he was not the eldest son who had advantages in the eyes of his father. But Ibrahim calmed his grandson by saying that the gift came from Allah. Moreover, Allah made the agreement that Yaqub had long been designated as the heir to the Abrahamic family, so that Yaqub was destined to receive special gifts in this world and in the hereafter. Yaqub also testified with the sons of Abraham about the religious will of inheritance from Allah. When Isha came home, he felt dying and exhausted from the fight against Namrud's. Then he found Yaqub cooking red bean soup for guests who mourned Ibrahim who had died. Isha, who was starving, urged and shouted for food to Yaqub, and Isha even stated that he was willing to give anything for his life. Yaqub is willing to provide food if Isha is willing to sell his firstborn rights to himself in exchange for the food. Then Isha agrees to this condition because Isha does not understand the privileges of firstborn rights. After finishing the food, Isha felt reborn and rejoiced. Since then Isha named himself Edom, the Red One. After having the rights of the firstborn from Isha, Yaqub legally obtained the privilege as the firstborn son of Ishaq. Meanwhile, Isha's name is increasingly known among the people of Canaan for his courage in defeating Namrud's alone. Ibrahim's tomb, which is located in the territory of the Hittite tribe, is often visited by Esau because he regrets not participating in the mourning. When the Hittite tribe, which is one of the tribes descended from Canaan, found Esau around, they wanted to marry their daughters to Esau, who was a grandson of Ibrahim, so that Esau would become an ally for the Canaan tribe in the war against the enemy. This marriage caused deep disappointment for Esau's parents. Through this marriage, Esau violated the mandate of Ibrahim, who had made a will so that his descendants would not marry people from the descendants of Canaan. Since Ibrahim died, Yaqub decided to move to the house of the prophet Sam, the son of the prophet Noah, to study religion and worship God. Ishaq often grieved and cried because he could not bear to see his beloved son participate in the customs of the Canaanites, who left the obligation of worship and even violated Abraham's teachings to always adhere to God's commands and guidance. Overwhelmed by heartache, Ishaq gets a serious illness accompanied by deteriorating eyesight. Thinking that this disease is a sign of death, Ishaq intends to pass on the blessing of grace to his eldest son, Esau, before death picks up. But Ishaq does not yet know that Esau's birthright has passed to Yaqub. Even though Ishaq called Esau the eldest son, God was more pleased with Yaqub's piety, so God sent an angel who helped Yaqub obtain the right as heir to Abraham's blessing. When Esau comes to meet his father to receive the gift of inheritance, Ishaq is surprised that he has blessed someone who is not his eldest son, Esau. But Ishaq changed his mind when Esau stated that he had sold the rights of the firstborn to Yaqub. Thus Ishaq realized that Allah helped arrange the destiny that was happening. As Allah promised to give a double blessing in the form of a gift in this world and the gift of the hereafter for Abraham, Ishaq obtained this blessing as Abraham's firstborn son, which later this blessing was passed on to Yaqub, Ishaq's eldest son. Finding Esau working hard while begging to get a share of the inheritance blessings, in the end Ishaq's son gets some blessings. Even though he himself sold his birthright, Esau deeply lamented the portion of the inheritance which he said Yaqub had usurped. Esau intends to kill him when his father dies. When she heard this curse, Rivkah advised Yaqub to temporarily move to his uncle's house, namely Laban, in the land of Haran. Ishaq and Rivkah release Yaqub's departure by admitting that Allah has been with Yaqub and affirming his rights as Isaac's firstborn son, who legally inherited a special blessing from Abraham. Ishaq also specifically advised Yaqub not to marry a woman of Canaan descent but to marry a woman who was still related to the Abrahamic family. When he heard the news that his father was not pleased with the women of Canaan, Esau decided to go to the house of his uncle, namely the prophet Ismail bin Ibrahim, to marry a daughter of Ismail. Esau has no intention of going to the land of Haran, because he knows that Ishaq was forbidden by Ibrahim not to go there. When leaving the land of Palestine, Ishaq provided a lot of possessions and livestock for Yaqub as part of the inheritance of his eldest son. Meanwhile, Esau was furious when he heard the news that Yaqub left while carrying abundant supplies from his parents. Esau said, "Isn't Yaqub enough to get a share of the blessings of the afterlife wealth, so that he wants to share the worldly wealth too, as he has schemed against me to get my share in the hereafter, so I will repay his scheme to obtain his earthly share." Esau set up a scheme by sending Ishaq's slaves to go deliver a message to Yaqub. When this mob caught up with Yaqub, they said, "Our master, Ishaq, has left a message for his son, Yaqub, to return the cargo of supplies to Esau through us, so that Esau will not be jealous, or that Esau will not go after Yaqub to the land of Haran." On the other hand, Yaqub has been grateful to receive God's blessings conveyed through his parents, which are enough guarantees to live in this world and in the hereafter. Yaqub was willing to give up all of these supplies for Esau, so that later he had to walk alone without carrying any supplies when he arrived at his uncle's house, other than the protection of Allah, who always accompanies Yaqub wherever he is. In the middle of this journey, Yaqub had a prophetic dream in which God promised that one day Yaqub's descendants would fill the earth in large numbers if he remained faithful to carry out God's commands. Then Yaqub erected a memorial sign at that place while pledging to Allah that he would immediately make a special offering at that place if one day he was allowed to return to his country safe. When he arrived in the land of Haran, Yaqub saw Rahil, his uncle's daughter, who immediately captivated Yaqub and wanted to take her as his wife. Laban, Yaqub's uncle, gave a condition that Yaqub must first work for 7 years to get Rahil. When Laban realized that his country was getting abundance because of the presence of Yaqub, who was blessed by God, then Laban devised various tricks to prevent Yaqub from returning to his father's house. Years later, Yaqub had abundant wealth in the land of Haran because he always adhered to Allah's commandments wherever he was, and he did not follow the customs of the inhabitants of the surrounding countries. While living in this country anyway, Yaqub got 12 children from his 4 wives. The names of Yaqub's 11 sons are Reuben, Simeon, Lawi, Judah, Zebulun, Issachar, Dan, Gad, Asher, Naphtali and Joseph, along with a daughter named Dinah. When Allah said to return to his father's house, Yaqub became a wealthy man with many children, many livestock, many slaves and an abundance of property when he left Haran, even though he was alone without carrying a load of provisions when he first arrived at land of Haran life in Palestine. On the way home, Yaqub had to fight against an angel who intended to block him from returning to Palestine, but with Allah's permission, Yaqub managed to win against the angel even though Yaqub received a blow to his groin. Since then Yaqub forbade himself to eat all kinds of animal groin as a form of warning for this incident. This prohibition was also applied to the sons of Yaqub. When he received news that he would face Esau and his gang, Yaqub earnestly begged Allah to fulfill the promise of the agreement to return safely to the land of Palestine. However, Yaqub was actually surprised when he found Esau feeling afraid of his presence, because Allah had sent hundreds of angelic armies who arrested and threatened to kill Esau's entire family if they dared to do evil to Yaqub and all that belonged to him. Covenant and punishment befell Yaqub. Yaqub set up camp in the midst of the tribes descended from Canaan when he arrived in Palestine. Yaqub forgot about his promise to immediately make a special offering to God as a form of gratitude, because all this time God had given him safety and had protected him from all kinds of dangers. For this attitude, Allah brought several punishments to Yaqub's family. Dinah, Yaqub's daughter, was raped by a prince from a tribe descended from Canaan. This caused great anger in Dinah's 2 brothers, Simeon and Lawi. Simeon considers this incident as blasphemy and desecration of the good name of the descendants of Israel. Meanwhile, Lawi considered that this incident undermined Abraham's promise to his descendants so that they would continue to be blessed, namely the prohibition against having family relations with the cursed descendants of Canaan. When Simeon was filled with revenge, he intended to slaughter all the men of the Canaan tribe who looked down on the descendants of Yaqub, as a result of that people having allowed immoral acts to occur in their midst. Lawi intends to kill them as a warning so that none of Yaqub's descendants will be persuaded to marry the desecrated descendants of Canaan, with the hope that later no descendants of Israel will share in the misfortunes and tribulations along with the descendants of Canaan, i.e. a nation that allows sinful acts to occur in their midst as a result of ignoring God's commandments. These 2 men departed carrying swords and mercilessly killed the entire tribe of Canaan descent in the city, because the tribe was not against the sin of defiling Dinah. In the middle of this journey, Yaqub had a prophetic dream in which God promised that one day Yaqub's descendants would fill the earth in large numbers if he remained faithful to carry out God's commands. Then Yaqub erected a memorial sign at that place while vowing to Allah that he would immediately make a special offering at that place if one day he was allowed to return to his country safely. When Simeon and Lawi came home, Yaqub scolded his 2 sons, acting rashly without first seeking consideration from his father. Nevertheless, Simeon defended himself by replying that he could not tolerate the barbaric treatment of the Canaanites who desecrated their younger brother. and hoped that this would serve as a warning to anyone who is determined to inflict evil on the Israelite family and who approves of evil will face God's wrath through his hands. Meanwhile, Lawi feels guilty because he did not respect his father's position. Then Lawi decides to persevere in worship and repentance to erase this sin. Since then, Lawi is no longer close to Simeon. As a result of Simeon and Lawi's violence, the people living in Palestine feel afraid to associate with the Yaqub family. The Canaan people think that the Yaqub family no longer applies to foreigners or residents of the country who live around it. The inhabitants of the land of Canaan wanted to wage war against them to take revenge. But the kings of Canaan did not continue this because they realized that Allah was always with the Yaqub family, so that Allah would not let anyone who did evil to the family escape just like that. Offhand as such, casual, offhand casually. After this incident, Yaqub realized his mistake against Allah, so he rushed to fulfill the promise of the agreement to make a special offering for Allah, right at the place where he had previously made a vow to Allah when leaving for the land of Haran. After fulfilling his promise to Allah, Yaqub invited his entire family to move to Ishaq's house. Yaqub and his sons. On the way to Ishaq's house, Yaqub received news that Rahil had given birth to his 13th child, a boy named Bunyamin. Having two sons from Rahil made Yaqub feel attached to Rahil, so that Rahil's sons, Yusuf and Bunyamin, were given special privileges over Yaqub's other children. As the chosen prophet, Yaqub was gifted with special knowledge from Allah, so that Yaqub is very concerned about Joseph's safety because there is a prophecy that Joseph will become a sign that will save the lives of all the children of Israel in the face of all difficulties. Yusuf also had a prophetic dream which meant that all his brothers and their parents would prostrate before him. Even Yusuf understood the meaning of this dream as a sign of his specialness compared to Yaqub's other children. This makes Yaqub happy that Yusuf inherited the talent for prophecy from Ibrahim and Ishaq, although there is also concern for Yaqub when Yusuf's brothers hear news about this dream, which can result in them becoming more jealous so that they hate them, threaten Joseph's safety. Yaqub forbade Yusuf to tell this dream to his brothers. Even so, Yusuf told this dream, which then sparked hatred in his brothers. Because of the special treatment of their two brothers, namely Yusuf and Bunyamin, Yaqub's 10 sons suspected that their father only wanted to give inheritance blessings to the sons of Rahil, Yaqub's favorite wife. Yehuda, together with his 9 brothers, devised a scheme so that Joseph would not get a share of the inheritance gift. They learned from Simeon and Lawi's careless actions, so Yehuda asks his father's permission first to travel with Yusuf. Although at first he refused his son's proposal for fear of being attacked, in the end Yaqub was willing to let Yusuf go with the promise that they must bring Yusuf home safely. Yaqub was very disappointed when he found out that they came home without Yusuf. He heard that they only found Yusuf's clothes covered in blood after being left alone. Knowing there was something odd about this explanation, Yaqub understood that his 10 sons were trying to separate him from his favorite son, so they could not really be trusted by him. Yaqub cried over this situation because he felt he was no longer respected by his sons. Moreover, the figure of Yusuf for Yaqub is a sign of help and a sign of safety for his descendants, so that the loss or death of Joseph was a sign that the end of all his descendants would soon come. Years later, Yaqub's premonition came closer to the truth when there was a prolonged bad season that stopped farming activities in Palestine, so that Yaqub's entire family was stricken with hunger. When a long period of famine occurred, Yaqub's 10 sons tried to invite Bunyamin to go to Egypt, but Yaqub refused this, although he was finally forced to allow this after a severe famine plagued all their family members. Although filled with heartache, Yaqub still has faith in Allah that Yusuf will return to him. When Yaqub's sons returned from a trip to buy food supplies in Egypt, Yaqub was surprised when he felt Yusuf's presence near him. This was due to Yusuf's clothes being brought from Egypt so that the clothes would be washed on his face, so that Yaqub's eyesight would improve. They also brought the good news that Joseph became an Egyptian commander who ruled over all policies and regulations in the land of Egypt. Yusuf invited Yaqub's entire family to move to Egypt during the famine. Yaqub's meeting with Yusuf, his favorite son, feels very happy because it has been proven that Yusuf is a sign of help and a sign of savior for Yaqub and his entire family. Migration to Egypt and inheritance of blessings. While living in Egypt, Yaqub cared for and taught the knowledge that had been obtained from his ancestors to the two sons of Yusuf. Yaqub felt close to them both so that he considered his two grandchildren as his own children. Before death picks up, Yaqub blessed the two sons of Yusuf as blessing his own children. Then the 12 sons of Israel were gathered together so that they might share in the inherited grace that came from God. Before giving the blessings of grace, Yaqub first wanted to know the faith of his sons by asking for testimony about what they would worship after his death. Yaqub was relieved to hear that all of his sons had vowed to serve Allah forever, so that each of his sons proved worthy as his heirs who received special blessings from Allah. Yaqub's first child, Reuben, received several praises and harsh reprimands, because his behavior did not inherit Yaqub's piety and personality, so that Reuben was not worthy of being called the firstborn of Israel. Simeon and Lawi got a joint share from Yaqub as a result of the massacre of one of the tribes descended from Canaan, which left a deep impression on Yaqub and made Israel's name both respected and feared by other nations. Yaqub warned that the combined strength of the two could cause great destruction to his enemies. Because of Simeon's character, who is willing to die for protecting the good name of the children of Israel, while Lawi's character is merciless to kill anyone who is determined to commit a heinous sin against God. From the hard character of the two of them, Yaqub also knew who was planning the plot to kill Yusuf. Moreover, Simeon hated Yusuf while Lawi was worried that his father would cheat on him. After finding his three brothers severely reprimanded, Judah fears that he will receive a similar share because he feels guilty for leading a plot to separate Joseph. However, Yaqub is proud of Judah, who has the wisdom to decide something, as Yaqub knows that Judah is the one who managed to avoid the sin of killing Yusuf. Yehuda is shown to have an attitude of fear of God's punishment, so that Judah succeeded in making his 9 brothers aware that Yusuf was also a son of Yaqub who was still related to them, so that the 10 sons of Yaqub agreed not to kill him. The other 6 sons of Yaqub received blessings and praise from Allah through Yaqub, because from the beginning they did not plot against Yusuf and only hoped for goodness from Allah in order to get a special blessing. Yaqub said a blessing about what would happen to them and their descendants with certain symbols, that when it was the turn of the blessing for Yusuf's share, Yaqub was very grateful to Allah because he was still allowed to see Yusuf and Yusuf's descendants, who were bestowed by Allah to save the continuation of the children of Israel facing various difficulties. Yaqub conveyed extraordinary praise to Yusuf, because the greatest part of the inheritance blessings from Abraham, Ishaq and himself were united in Yusuf, Israel's firstborn. Bunyamin also received a blessing from his father relating to the future of his offspring. Before he died, Yaqub advised him to be buried in a private burial place owned by the Ibrahim family in Palestinian land. Allah named the prophet Yaqub as one of the 3 most important chosen prophets, the prophets Abraham and the prophets Ishaq. Apart from that, Yaqub is also called Israel, the ancestral father of the children of Israel, namely the chosen people who are privileged by Allah. Israel's named twice in the Quran, and he has many descendants who are classified as prophets.